Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of the 1871 podcast. And I'm delighted to say our special guest tonight is former Reading midfielder Paul Holsgrove, who already knows that he's one of my favourite players from the 90s, obviously Dylan as well. But Reading midfielder Paul Holsgrove is our special guest tonight. Welcome to the show, Paul. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good, and all the
I'm
better.
happy to be on, even more so that I'm now one of your favourite players, but I'm sure you tell everybody that.
Not everyone, no. We have to tell Dylan.
There you go.
It's true anyway, but look,
Thank you.
welcome to the show. And before we speak to you, Paul, I'd like to have a quick chat about the current Reading side with Johnny. And Johnny, obviously, a couple of tough games coming up at Middlesbrough on Saturday. Middlesbrough currently third in the Championship. And then on Tuesday, Reading are at home to second placed Sheffield United. So, Johnny, what are you expecting from the next two games?
Yeah, sorry, the signal wasn't great there. Who knows? I think that Middlesbrough away is going to be a tough one, but go there with nothing to lose. You know, I'm confident that Middlesbrough haven't had back-to-back defeats, but it's always the first time for everything.
Yeah, Johnny, I think is your internet connection all right? We're losing you a little bit. Are you there?
It's all right. No, I'll switch over. Something's not right.
All right. Can you hear us? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Should we do that? Do you want to do that bit again? Try again.
Yeah, like, hold on a second.
So, Johnny, what are you
sorry.
What are you expecting from the next
two
games? Go.
Who knows? Middlesbrough away. So they've not lost two games in a row. So there's always the first time for that to happen. We'll see. I think after the rumours of what's going on around points deductions and everything again, it feels like we've actually gone back to last year when we started this. So it's very very concerning, and if we get a points deduction, God knows how that will affect the team. But let's be positive. We don't know. No news is good news.
Yeah, it could be. Feels like deja vu, isn't it? But then that's what deja vu feels like. Anyway, at the time of recording, because we're not we're recording this a bit ahead of when this goes out. So at the time of recording, all we know is that there seems to be a possibility of a 6-point deduction, but that's all we know at this stage. So who knows? By the time this goes out, we might know more, but obviously that's all we know for now. So, Dylan, coming to you now, talking of tough games. Unfortunately, you had a defeat, Marumo Gallants, against Algerian side USM Alger, I think they're called, in the CAF Confederation Cup on Sunday. But you've gone in, you've bottom of the league, taken over. You've won 4 out of 5 since you joined, and Marumo Gallants still in a good position to qualify for the knockout rounds of the CAFCON Cup, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I said to the players before, I've been to Algiers twice before and played USMA Algiers is the official title, and the place is very intimidating. It's daunting to play there. The fans are absolutely nuts. I mean, the fans are amazing. If there wasn't one flare, there was 50 flares, and then fireworks were whizzing over the players as they were getting ready for kickoff. It's very intimidating atmosphere, and the Algerians are very good at winding players up and getting players booked early. So it puts your team on the back foot when you get 2 or 3 players booked, because that they do what the Italians used to do, annoy and cause a reaction. But on perspective, USMA have always been in the Champions League or the Confederation Cup since it started. And Marumo Gallants, it's their first time. So at the end of the day, we didn't embarrass ourselves. We conceded 2 set-piece goals, which we went through like with a fine toothpick to make sure that we didn't, because we knew that was a threat. But I think the players, were overawed by the occasion, and especially the fans. But it was a great trip. It was a fantastic trip, and they learned something from it, which is always good from a football perspective. But yeah, it was a good trip. We flew Friday. Took us 18 hours to get there, and then it took us 24 hours, to come back. Plus, we had a 6-hour drive to Bloemfontein. So, and we've got a game tomorrow against Mamelodi Sundowns in the Nedbank Cup, which I won, 2 years ago.
And they're top of the table. Marumo Gallants are bottom. They were bottom when you took over, and we talked about a couple of tough games for Reading. But how are you feeling about chances of getting through in a cup like you say that you've won?
Well, it's a cup game. Who thought Blackburn had beat Leicester last night? So you've got to say, well, we're at home, but we're kind of away. The chairman's brought it to Bloemfontein because there's a good support base here, and they haven't got a football team in Bloemfontein anymore. So tomorrow, even though it's a cup game and it's important, the priority that the club have to look at is staying in the Premier League, and as well as getting to the Confederation Group quarter-finals through the group stages. The Nedbank Cup, they've been in it twice. We won it 2 years ago. They were runners-up last year. It's important because it's like the equivalent of the FA Cup and here in South Africa. So it's going to be tough, but I've got to make a big decision tomorrow, and things might kick off tomorrow, which might throw a spanner in the works.
We'll catch up with you on that on the next episode, I'm sure. And in the meantime, Dylan, I mentioned to Johnny, obviously we all know a couple of tough games for Reading, away to Middlesbrough, home to Sheffield United on Tuesday. Both could be in the Premier League next season. What do you think Reading can do from those 2 games?
They've just got to keep winning. They've just got to keep winning. At the end of the day, whatever happens off the field, it's not the player's fault. They've just got to keep winning. They've just got to go out there. I've had teams where they've not been paid for months. Some get half salaries, and I've always said, look, just don't drop your standards. Keep yourself in the game, keep yourself available. And your performances get your moves, and that's what they've got to do. I haven't read what's happened, so I'm actually. Somebody sent me a message this afternoon saying, "Oh, Reading." Well, I'm not going to swear, but he said Reading are fucked. And I said, "Well, I don't know what's happened." So, but for me, whatever football throws at you, you've as a professional, you've just got to keep going and maintain them standards, because you're doing it not for yourselves, you're doing it for the supporters. And without the supporters, the football club does not exist.
Well, of course, a lot of Reading fans, going back to your time, Dylan, will remember that famous / infamous season when they restructured the league. Reading finished second and didn't go up, which brings me nicely on to our special guest, Paul Holsgrove. Paul, going to do a little introduction to you for people who might not know some of this. So you joined Reading in the summer of '94. You stayed for 3.5 seasons, just under 3.5 seasons. You made 86 appearances and scored 10 goals. You started your career at Aldershot. Boo. Never mind. And played for a few other clubs before joining Reading, including Farnborough, Wokingham, Luton, and Heracles Almelo in Holland. Is that right?
Heracles, yes.
Heracles. Yeah, I'm doing really well with the pronunciation. Anyway. What were they in the top division in Holland at that time?
They were.
Okay. And they have won the championship, haven't they?
Wolf, now you're asking me, and I wouldn't be able to tell you that. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're not. I would say they're probably not that well known compared to the clubs like.
No, you're right. Yeah, I think they are. I wouldn't say overachieving, but doing very well if they're in the top division as a club, as a history. So.
And then your next club was a club that Reading fans will be very familiar with, of course, Millwall, and then you joined Reading. And we were chatting before the show about Steve Wood. You've both played for Millwall, you've both played for Reading, but you missed each other both times, I think, didn't you?
That's right, yeah. But played in many a charity match together.
Yeah, so you know Steve, didn't you? But never actually played together professionally.
No.
So as I say, you joined Reading in '94 before the start of that amazing season. Dylan already there. Reading had won the title, come up into what is now the Championship. And can I start by asking you, how that move to Reading came about, and what did you know about Reading before you joined the club?
Yeah, I was at Millwall, as you say. I was playing under Mick McCarthy. And bless him, Mick's still going to this day as a manager. As we know, he's just got the Blackpool job. And just a straight shooter, Mick. So it was coming towards the end of my second year. I'd done okay. I'd played a few games under him, but I was never his first choice. And it was just as I say, a straight shooting conversation between the two of us. And it was time to go. At that time, again, I've got to try and remember this, Mark. It's a good while ago, but I do remember that Watford were interested in me because that was then Glenn Roeder, bless him, who's passed away as well. And then there was Reading. Reading hadn't come up, and my agent at the time, who Dill may remember, Barry Silkman, who started to look after many a player, was trying to push some good players towards Reading. Mark McGee being the manager, Colin Lee the coach, and it was a really good feeling going there. I did actually go on trial to start with at Reading. I didn't sign permanently. I say trial. It was more of go and have a look at it. Let's see, and if there's a marriage of ways between the two, the club and the player, there was a deal to be done, and that's it. And I signed for Reading.
And I'm going to bring Dylan and Johnny in a second, but I'd just like to ask you, obviously the way we all know about how that season panned out, but at the start, Reading had gone up as champions. You always get that bit of momentum, that feel-good factor as well from the previous season. What was the feeling when you came into the club and you met the players and pre-season? Because you actually joined quite late, didn't you? You joined just before the start of the season. Is that right?
I don't know if it was it wasn't, as you're right, it wasn't at the start of pre-season. I think it's interesting. My son now plays, he's a professional footballer. He's playing out in Portugal. And I actually heard this the other day from his agent saying, and I think Dill might even look at this and go, do you know what? He's probably right. They always say now, as an average, a player has 2 or 3 happy years in their career. Now, that might sound quite stark and might think that doesn't sound like a lot. But actually now, in hindsight, I was a pro plus apprentice for, 16 years. And you're probably not far off that. And my happiest time was at Reading. I think we were the right age. If you look at what was classed as a veteran player or an older player, you were looking at Darius. Ady was young. Obviously, Dylan, Gilksy wasn't that old. Scotty Taylor, Ozzy was young. Stuart Lovell. If you think of all those players, Andy Burnell, Shaq. Shaka was a kid. And we just grew together. And there was a really good bond. And of course, I think you have to give Mark McGee and Colin Lee a lot of credit as to the way they got us playing. But we played as a team together. And as we well know, the results started to go well early on. In recalling it, I think, we get the record in something like the first 6 games or something. It was the best record Reading had ever had. And I think that was probably how it started. It was never an expectancy to get promoted or to get into the playoffs. It was, let's see how it goes. And I think within that, as you say, first 3 or 4 games, suddenly it's like, we got a team here. And there was a lot of confidence flowing through us. And as you say, the rest is history.
And Dylan, I want to bring you in now. What were your recollections of when Paul arrived, and what do you want to ask Paul?
Well, I still think he had the worst gear ever, and I thought that was his Parker coat that he was wearing behind him. Because he had one of them. He came to training in one of those things. What his chair he's probably sat on. He's probably renovated his chair into his old coat. his Parker jacket, his dance moves were terrible. But no, I'm only kidding.
Dear.
It was, like I say, it was good when Paul joined, because it made competition in that midfield, and it made everybody work harder. You know, and I remember we played a game against Leyton Orient, and he pinged me a ball. I pinged him a ball, from the corner, and I think he volleyed it in the top corner. And from then, you know, you thought, wow, this is a player. But you know, we had such good competition in that midfield. You know, Paul also, agree with me that it was difficult to get in that Reading team, and to cement a place in that Reading team on a regular basis. It was very, very difficult, and you know, but credit to him, you know, he didn't moan, he didn't groan. You know, as I've always said about Reading Football Club, we had this togetherness. We had this group of players that, you know, whether you're playing or you're not playing, we all mixed in together. We all went out together. We all did things together, and that's what the beauty of that time at Elm Park was for us. And when he did play, I think he got injured. I can't remember what game it went on, Halsey. What game?
Yeah, broke my leg. Yeah, I broke my leg, didn't I? Yeah.
You know, and unfortunately, that was his chance. He was on a roll then, and then, you know, injuries, you know, kind of knocked him back a wee bit from then. But I totally agree with what he was saying about, you know, Darius and Adi and, you know, Jiltsy and, you know, Shaka. I mean, it was a squad that, you know, it'll never be repeated at Reading Football Club. And anybody can argue with me about this team promotion, this team in the Premier League. Unfortunately, we didn't get in the Premier League that year. Halsey scored I think you scored at Middlesbrough, didn't you, Halsey?
Yeah, we beat them, didn't we? Yeah.
Yeah, and we were unbeatable. You know, we were unplayable. You know, and unfortunately, the league dictated that we were going to change from 21 teams to 20, and it meant we went to the playoffs.
The only time ever in history. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and me and Halsey were, you know, we weren't even on the bench.
No,
obviously, that hurts because it's Wembley Stadium, but you know, we all stuck together. We all, you know, like I say, it was a big family. You know, and that was the beauty of our time at Reading Football Club.
And Johnny, bring you in now. What do you want to ask Paul? If you're still with us.
Some of the guys have been before about the difference between them and when Mick and Jimmy took over. What was it? What was that like for you, Paul, to change?
Yeah, you know, it's an interesting discussion on that as well. I mean, this has been we've spoken about it many a time before. You cannot deny how much Mark McGee and Colin Lee did for us. The manager Mark was very much a man manager, but he allowed the tactics and the tactical nous to be Colin. And again, saying what I'd said about the team, you know, we set up so well so early that we were into games. Really, it becomes like a second nature to you once you start getting on a roll, and you see that with any team in any league to this day. Now, when obviously Mark then left and went, it could have been a bit of a nightmare. It could have been an upset. But I think what was good with Mick and Jimmy, I mean, Adi was helping out at that time. I think Jeff Hopkins as well, was just to keep it going. There was nothing really to change. Like Dylan said, there was no team we feared. You know, if you think of how much was spent that year, if I remember, it was something like 200 grand. When you compare that to the teams we were playing against, but the team just worked. And we had pace, we had talent, we had, you know, defensively very good. We could score goals, and so I think from their point of view, I don't know how they see it themselves, but it wasn't really much to tinker with. Really, it was just to let it run.
Paul, I just want to ask you about playing in that midfield. You mentioned Darius, you know, and obviously we all know what a fantastic striker Jimmy Quinn was, and you had Michael Gilks, and you mentioned Andy Bernal and Shaka, but you were right in the middle of it. What was it? Was it a case of you kind of instinctively knew what the other players were going to do, so you sort of had that confidence that if you put a pass through to Jimmy Quinn, he was you were pretty sure he was going to meet it. You know, if you put the ball out to Michael Gilks, was it kind of almost instinctive in a way?
What you mean is like in a telepathic way. I think you're right. I mean, Dale was just saying there, you know, we all knew what our strengths were. My best mate, I mean, Dylan knows, it was the two South London boys, was myself and Ozzy, Simon Osborne. And I had a real good buzz and bond with Ozzy as a person as well as a player. And then, of course, we played in midfield together. But then you had your wingers. You were quick. You know, we had Scotty Taylor and Michael Gilks, or we could use other players in those roles, but you knew where you were with it. I mean, we had James Lambert. I mean, James wasn't as quick as the two, but he had great ability. But again, just if you I'm recalling memories, Colin Lee, classic things he used to do, and it's the games played like that even to this day, where we would work on having the ball, let's say, for instance, on the right side, on the right wing, around Andy Burnell, Scotty Taylor. And it would be about then shifting the ball from the right to the left as quickly as possible to alienate their right back, which was against our left winger, and our left back, which was Dill, for them to play the 2v1 and get past. And it sounds so simple, but actually when you have a coach that could understand it, could relay it to us, and for us to then work it, it was phenomenal. I remember as well, I mean, Scotty scored at Stoke and I played the ball through to him. I didn't do anything special. It was just that we understood our role so well. And again, you know, coming back to it, we had everything we needed. We had the talented footballers, we had the strong defenders, we had the quick wingers, we had the goal scorers. So within that team, we had everything that was required to win a game and win a lot of games.
And Paul, you know, that's obviously the football side of things, but we love hearing about funny stories. And you know, on the last episode, we heard yet another funny story about Martin Allen during his time at Reading. But Dylan's talked to us a lot about Utopia, and he's talked about all sorts of things, and the little room, you know, the players' room under the stand. What were some of your kind of fondest memories, you know, funny stories, that sort of thing?
No, I mean, Dill's right. You know, when we went out, if we were celebrating, and again, you know, I can go through all my squads. It was never the same as Reading. If we went out, there was like 15 of us. It wasn't two. It was literally we're out and everybody was out. Funny stories. I mean, I do remember, I don't know how he got it. I think Stuart Lovell got one of the red cards off the referee one year, that year, and when we were in Utopia. And Archie, as in Stuart Lovell, was just walking around giving everybody red cards. I think like the dancers were even getting red cards. And, you know, it was a good banter. And one of my good friends, still to this day, he was my head usher at my wedding, was Tony Herbert, who at the time owned Val Bonds off in Caversham. We were always there. You know, when we were together, the group were together. And I think maybe even the modern player, you know, misses that, because the banter and the camaraderie you get from that. And Dill will tell you, you know, we'd have a laugh about some story the next day when you're in the changing room together, and all that ever was doing was just you're making you closer, and you wanted to play and fight for your teammate because you were just really good mates, and it didn't matter who was out.
Also, I remember when we had the Christmas party and Vinnie Jones had arranged for 3 strippers to come to that little pokey bar behind under the main stand. And the funniest thing was Uwe Hartenberger. He was not. I was not his favourite person ever again, because those 3 strippers never showed up. And I'll never forget Uwe. Dylan, where is these strippers? Where are these girls? I am not happy. And then he left.
The strongest man ever, wasn't
he? He got the train and went to King's Cross Station and didn't come back till the next morning.
Oh, brilliant. But we were that good deal, weren't we? We were that close together, you know, all the boys. And I mean, actually, there is a good story about this northern person that I'm speaking to now. I mean, you know, we were in Lanzarote and he used to always give us grief for being, what was it, Southern Shandy, something drinking. But Dill tried to tell us this at like 6 o'clock in the morning in the cab, but within 5 minutes he's asleep, and then half an hour journey back to the hotel before he woke up again and started giving us grief about being the same thing about drinking. So there you go. We were, it really was, it was a special time. And out of all the clubs I've left and you know, go back to, I would state that Reading is my home. I mean, you know, my boy ends up being in the academy there as well, so I've got a real affinity with the club. But it was just a very special time. And it still says, you know, when you look at what we did as a team, when the manager had done what he'd done to bring in these players, and of course the players he kept already to get promoted, I think that's a very unique situation. If you put that up against a lot of clubs that have spent and done whatever, that wasn't the case at Reading.
Yeah, and Paul, just going back to the Elm Park days, because obviously, you know, Sir John Medeski came in and did fantastic things for the club. But I remember those Elm Park days. I remember the night games under the floodlights, Dilksey bombing down the wing in front of the South Bank, all that. That's like, you know, holds really special memories for me and for Reading fans. What was that atmosphere like, you know, playing at Elm Park?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it was. You're right. There was something about the club, wasn't there? And the atmosphere was great. The pitch was beautiful. I do remember that. You know, I like to play football myself, and the pitch was stunning. But it was also, as we see with these teams that get really good home form, there was something about Elm Park, and teams didn't like coming. I mean, you couldn't say it was intimidating. I mean, I've been at Millwall prior to that. You know, at the old Den, there was an intimidation factor there, but from the guys in the stand, you know, the supporters, you couldn't say that's what Reading was intimidating for that reason. But to come and play at Reading, I mean, there you go. I suppose you're thinking of stories, and Dylan can vouch for this. If you ever went to Norwich away, you knew you had to just hold on for 10, 15 minutes, because Norwich used to absolutely blast you really quick. It was their mantra. It was their way. And without saying there was anything specifically unique about Reading, it was similar in a sense that teams coming there, it was never a good environment for them to play. And yet for us, it was great.
Johnny, have you got anything else that you want to ask Paul in particular?
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, when you got your injury, Paul, were you the same player after that? You know, back in those days when, you know, medical science and all that, how did it affect you afterwards?
Do you know it? There you go, Johnny. We're really getting into your history now. I mean, I was injured a lot in my career. There's no getting away from it. I mean, my game showed that. You know, I only hit about, I think, 280 in games, and I was quite unfortunate with injuries I had. You talk about trusting science, and I broke my leg, as was said. In fact, Dill might not remember this, but it was myself and Uwe that got taken off. We both get taken off the pitch. I got hit on my calf, back of my calf. Uwe was screaming like he'd broken his leg. We both got taken to hospital. He got a little knock on his ankle. He played the following week. I was out for 14 weeks from there on. There you go, bless him, Uwe. And but you know, the science at the time was carry on walking and running. It might sound bizarre to say it. So I had a broken leg, and it wasn't about going through pain, but the whole sort of thesis behind was keeping my muscle strength and not getting muscle wastage by just going in plaster. They then told me that I could be back play within 6 weeks. And as I said to you, I think it took me 14 weeks, because it was just a complete balls up. Balls up. Go on.
We've not got the technology now. You know, I wish.
No.
You know, I wish we would have.
Total hindsight, isn't it?
Now. And like I say, you know, I would rather, you know, in hindsight, you know, the money that's in football now, Paul, is unbelievable. But the banter and the crack and the social aspect, that's gone out the window.
Yeah, it has.
You know,
it has.
You know, I'll never regret anything I did at Reading Football Club. The people I met, the players that I played with and alongside. You know, it was one of the, well, it's the best club, like you say, that you played for. And
yeah,
like I say, you know, I'm still in contact, you know, with people that, you know, have moved on to different avenues in life, but we still have that same banter. We still have that same. Now I've got you on here, and I'll get your number again. You know, it'll be the same now. So
no, you're right. You are right. We were good brothers together, weren't we?
Yeah, Paul, obviously, I don't know if there's anything else that you particularly recall from that season. We all know how it ended, and I just wondered, you know, your time at the club. Obviously, you went from that fantastic first season to what happened of the following 2 seasons, Reading struggling. What was it like to go from, you know, such a great first season, obviously just missing out on going up to the Premier League, but then having 2 kind of seasons of struggling towards the bottom end of the table?
Well, I mean, you both, yourself and Johnny, have asked about the management and also with Mick and Jimmy. And when you start a pre-season, you're starting afresh, regardless of your history of the year before. Relegated, promoted, champions, whatever it would be. And the managers then at that moment have to take the mantle and produce something within the training and also the team, and if it's new players, new additions and so forth. But second to that as well, you have a reputation. So we were a team that ran Middlesbrough right to the end to winning that league, and we were a target. And we never, for the whole of that second season, it never got right. Never. And I'm not talking ill of Mick and Jimmy, but they never really got us clicking. It was never the same again. And that's why I come back to Mark and Colin, that they had something very special there. And interestingly, when you talk about experiences as well, when you see what Mark did, he went off to Wolves and Leicester, where he had a massive budget. He was never quite the same manager himself. He had to work so hard with what he had at Reading, which meant he had to really delve into the player he was bringing in and everything that would fit. And sometimes when you give someone too much, it's never quite the same. And I think, again, that looking back period was that Mark and Colin, they nailed it. They absolutely nailed it.
Yeah.
They did.
And Paul, I just want to kind of touch on what happened after Reading. I think you went on loan to Grimsby in '97, and then Crewe, Stoke, Brighton, up to Scotland, same as Dylan. Hibs, Airdrieonians, back down to Northern England, Darlington, and then you finished up on the sort of local non-league scene, if you like, Hayes,
yeah.
Windsor and Eton in 2001, which you talk about sort of the early 2000s. Doesn't seem that long ago for people of our age, but it's sort of more than 20 years ago now, isn't it? But you've kind of continued your journey in football through your son, I guess, Jordan Holsgrove. You mentioned earlier on he played for Reading's academy, the under 23s. He did actually sign pro for Reading, didn't he? But didn't quite break into the first team, and he actually signed for Celta Vigo in 2020, was it? I think
a couple of years ago. Yeah, blimey, yeah. I don't know what years they are now, but
yeah, and he's represented Scotland at under 21s, and as you say, he's now playing in Portugal. And I'll have a go at pronouncing this. Passos de Ferreira.
That's it. Paso, as they call it, like pronounce it. Passos de Ferreira. Yeah.
Yeah. So just the important question here is he a better player than you were?
Many people tell him not, but look, all you want, and I think Dylan will vouch, to live your life. You're a professional footballer. Go and enjoy it. He's got a very good talent. He has, without a doubt, got many a year to play and can do a lot more. Who knows where that will take him? But it's his time now. Dylan and I had our time as well as all the other boys. It goes so quickly. I don't know how many games that Dylan remembers. I don't. It's sometimes I only spark a memory when I see my boy in a certain situation on a pitch. But if you actually sat me down and said, name, I don't know, a third of your games, I couldn't remember. So it's just enjoy it. I mean, what a life. You're at school and you want to be a footballer, and you're one of the very few that can actually gets the chance to play professionally, play at a very good level. And like Dylan's saying, what a life. It's amazing. So,
I mean, Paul, I mean, I always thought it was difficult, especially when you were at a big club like ours at Leeds, and then wasn't playing, and then got the opportunity to come down to Reading, and like I say, I'd agreed to go to Huddersfield. Gordon Strachan spoke to Mark McGee. Mark McGee phoned me. I came down, and everybody thinks it's luck. Luck has a little bit to do with it, but it's the hard work and the effort and the energy, and the getting on with players and getting on with the staff at a football club. And it was a small football club. I think there must have been 6 or 7 in the office. Now you've got probably 6 or 7 in one room looking after one. And I'm so happy that Jordan's doing so well. You know, I'd lost contact of him when he was at Reading, not through wanting to. It's just how things happen wherever I am in the world. You know, and I'm so happy he's doing well in Portugal, and he's had the opportunity to go to Spain. You know, but now it's like, I love telling people about my time at Reading. I love telling people about, the goals I scored at Reading, the championship I won at Reading, and it's something that nobody can take away from me. And it doesn't matter what level you play at, And I've always appreciated that, and I'm sure Jordan does that now as well, especially knowing that his dad used to play football as well.
Yeah, no doubt. But do you know, Dill? I mean, you can tell these guys, we're brothers still, aren't we? And I think that's a special bond you only ever get from being in a team that you enjoyed being together, a squad you enjoyed being together. Doesn't matter who you see, where you see them at any time. It's just, it was a very, very special bond. I mean, I do go back to Reading still. I actually did a bit of business, fun enough, with Nigel Howe, and you go into there and you see the staff, and you see Jackie from our time. I mean, there's not many left, as you say. They still want to see you. They still want to see you, because it wasn't them and us; it was us. I can't. I mean, we've said it enough times here, haven't we, to vouch for the special environment around the club at that time. Well, I mean, probably was before our time as well, but very special.
And Johnny, have you got another question for Paul?
Just my memory fails me as well. But did you end up playing in goal one game?
No, definitely not. No.
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 The other thing I was going to ask you, Paul, with Jordan being a player and you being the next player, does that make it harder for him or easier?
Yeah, Johnny, it's the same. It's the same both ways, isn't it? Because he and I can talk on the level of being on that pitch, and I can deal with. Will always vouch for me on this. When you're on the pitch and there's a guy that's 90 yards away that the whole of the crowd can see, but you can't because you got someone right in your face, or you got someone just about to try and tackle you. You don't see that guy, and so there's a different experience of being on the pitch to being in the stand, and that's not being derogatory in any way, but you can understand from being in a player situation, it's a very unique situation. So that's good. I mean, the Jordan thing, I met Robert Codner the other day. Codner was with us for a while on loan at Reading, and he's like, Jordan, you'll never be as good as your dad, and it's a bit of banter and what have you. So of course, for Jordan, he's got that side of it. He's always having to not live up to me, because I don't want him to live up to me, but he's always going to be told about his dad. But I don't know, you guys would know or remember, my dad was a pro as well. My dad played for Sheffield Wednesday and Wolves. I mean, he was a legend. My dad at Wolves played at a much better level than me. I was at Reading, I'd get posts coming through asking to get my dad's autograph. This is way before anything to do with social media. I had to handle it. So I had to handle the fact that, he was one place away from being in the 66 World Cup squad and so forth. And I was always told that. So in answer to that, John, it can work both ways. There are pros and cons to it. But Dylan said it at the start, with how he is now with his team, you have to have a resilience to be a pro. And it's one of the biggest things going. Either the fact that you've been dropped in the team, you've lost in the team, you're at the bottom of the league, you're at the top of the league, but not go, whatever it is, there has to be a real resilience about you. And there's only ever one person that can do that, and that's you. You can have a strong family around you, friends and so forth, but there's only one person that can ever go on that pitch and do those things and stand up for themselves. So yes, there's pressures, but actually at the end of the day, it comes down to the individual.
And Paul, I'm going to let Dylan have the last question, but before that, you said that you struggle to sort of remember a lot of the games, but do you have during your time at Reading, did you have a favourite game? Was there a sort of favourite goal? Favourite Reading player that you played with? I know you talked about that relationship with Simon Loss, but what would you sort of pick out as one or two of your favourite memories from his time?
I mean, you have to say the Middlesbrough game. Dylan said it there when we went up there. I mean, that's Brian Robson's team, and we were going up to what was then Ayrton Park, wasn't it? And you're expecting, I'm not saying we were expecting it, but everybody's expecting us to get beaten convincingly. I think, if I remember, they were unbeaten before we played them at home. And of course, we won 1-0 and I scored the goal with the worst celebration in the world. But there you go. But,
Agreed.
It was... it was just, it was incredible, and there you come. We had beers on the coach on the way home, which you could never see now, what Dylan's talking about. And we were out after, and that's a memory. I had some good memories there. I mean, I could have played at a higher level. There was chances for me to go, which actually was in the second season when I started playing sweeper, because, having a midfielder drop into that sweeper role in those days, you were seen for a different way of playing. It never materialised, and that's the way it goes. But I had some good memories of proper games. And when we went to Deal's team, we went to Leeds. I think it was in the quarterfinals of the Coca-Cola Cup, whatever it's called, and I, deserved to beat them on that day. And that's the team that had either just won the championship or about to, wasn't it? Just before it chased the Premier League.
No, it was that was 2 years before. Because remember,
2 years before.
I was on crutches.
There you go.
Play against my old team.
Of course, you would have done.
Yeah, I did. I had that injury.
Dylan, yeah. I got a question for you. You said you were talking earlier about the strippers, and you said that it was Vinnie Jones that organised the strippers, or was that a slip of the tongue?
No, Vinny. No, I called Vinny. When we were at Leeds, Vinny organised some really lovely strippers at Leeds, and on the trip, a typical Christmas day out. That would be one of the things that we'd start off with. We'd then go for a bit of lunch, and then wherever we'd end up. But we're always training the next day, so it wasn't as if we'd had a day off. We were always, and that's the beauty of it. We partied hard, but we worked hard. And like I say, I phoned Vinny up. Vinny had organised these 3 strippers. I think they were the same girls that we had Leeds the year before, but they never pitched. They were from London, but they never pitched. And like I said, I'll never forget Uwe. I don't think Uwe talked to me for about a month.
Well, I remember that was the year of the Uves, wasn't it? Because Middlesbrough had Uwe Fuchs. So
yes,
I don't know if you remember that. So it was quite.
I mean, I do have one memory actually, and that was us lot in Lanzarote. We went to Lanzarote. So like Dill says, I mean, I couldn't get back from my broken leg. I wasn't far off, but I hadn't played at all. To try and be involved in, of course, the playoffs and then the playoff final, which we all wanted to be. And we were given something like, I think we had 7 days out in Lanzarote. It was 10 or 12 days to the playoff final after beating Tranmere. And again, like Dylan said, because we'd all been involved, we were all travelling together up to Tranmere and at home and what have you. And then it was like, right, we're going off to Lanzarote, but you're going to get 2 or 3 nights to do what you want to do, which we did. So, I mean, we were on the northern part of the island, straight across the Port of the Carmen every day in a load of cabs, and we enjoyed ourselves. And again, you look back now, the boys all loved the drink, didn't they? And then the managers tried to say, right, after day 2, there's no more drinks. And there's just the stories of the managers watching the bar girl walking past with about 15 bottles of beer, going to one of the boys' rooms and knocking on the door. And we'd all be in there, and the gaffer's like that, get out. And then we just go to another room and another room. So there you go. We're just a good bunch together and real brothers, and that showed on the pitch. So.
All right, go on then, Johnny. Do you have one last question before we finish?
I can listen to this one. I was just the same, Paul. Like, as a player in that team, and you talk about the spirit and everything else, when it went into decline with Mick and Jimmy the following season, and we lost a lot of players, didn't we, as well? How hard was that? How frustrating is that for yourself, being part of a squad and then going into a lesser team that's got, we've lost some players. AD went, I think Simon Osborne, and weren't really replaced very well, were they, to be honest?
No, but you never quite know, Johnny. That's all you ever say. You can never, you're starting pre-season. It's like, okay, how does this look? Fun enough, Mark McGee tried to sign me as well. In fact, I think Portsmouth tried to sign me, and I negotiated at Reading and stayed. It was a big, because of how well we'd done. I think probably most of the players there were offers to go elsewhere. So it was decimated. You're right. But when you start, you always believe there's still enough talent there. You're still looking at players there you think could do the business. And I do believe still it comes down to the coaching, and how you are. You're asking Jimmy Quinn and Mick Gooding, who were players for the last part of the season when they first took over, we were just rolling. We were steamrolling teams. So they didn't really have to do too much tactically. And then you're asking 2 novice managers to be able to pick them up from where they'd been the year before as you quite rightly say, with big characters going out of that dressing room. And I'm not saying it was unachievable, but it was always going to be a hard steer, but you didn't know it. You're a pro. You're under contract. You're playing. Dylan's saying it there, isn't he? You heard him at the start. It doesn't matter how the results are going. It doesn't matter what the club's doing, like Reading at the moment with the points deduction. As a professional footballer, you are playing for the shirt. You're not a lifelong supporter. You guys are. And so you have a responsibility to give your all in any moment you can. And now, of course, we all know that doesn't always work out like that. But that's really where you are and what's the requirement of you as a pro.
And Paul, I'll just finish off with this one. I mean, we talked about the next 2 games coming up, a couple of tough games, it's fair to say. What do you make of the situation, at Reading this season and going back to last season and points deductions and all that? What does that kind of, does that get to you a little bit that this is a club that you've got such fond memories and it's not going as well as it could be and all that sort of thing? What are your...
I totally agree with you. My experience, again, you have to remember that my boy signed there when he was 6 years of age and stayed until he was 2021. So I'd had my time as a player. I was then there as a father. I was there like 5 days a week. He was in the academy training or playing. So I was around the club a lot. My mind obviously changed because I was becoming, as you say, I'm a father now. I'm looking at it completely different. And when you look now and you look at these clubs that are struggling, it's all to do with what's going on at the top. You can name it now with Southampton, for instance, who for so long were going so well. Look at Brighton. They're going phenomenally well. Well, they're being run well from the top. And I think, for Jordan up to the age of probably 14 or 15, I could always say to him, look, if you're a good academy player, you've got a chance to play in the first team because you had Nigel Howe there, you had Sir John. They knew how to run a club and they run it well. And they had a stability about them. The way Reading has been dealt, well, what they have been dealt with these owners in the last, let's say, 10 years, has really ripped a big part out of the club, unfortunately. And so when you look at the team now, potentially they could win any game. They have the potential, but it's like a car, and you always talk about how many cylinders a car has. If you're not using all of them, you're never going to get the power out of the car. And it just feels like there's a detach between the ownership and the hierarchy and the playing staff. And it always shows up on the pitch.
Well, Paul, that's fantastic to have you on as a guest. And for our listeners, our next episode is available from 8 p.m. on Monday evening, when our guest will be the Reading Chronicle Royals reporter, James Earnshaw. And then on Thursday next week, we'll be joined by the current Reading FC commercial director, Tim Kilpatrick. And if you listen to our last episode, I mentioned a quiz. Coming soon, we'll have a Reading FC quiz for you to take part in, so you can test your Royals knowledge. And that's available to listen into a week on Sunday. And our guest coming up includes someone that was mentioned tonight, Colin Lee. He's coming up as a guest soon. Also Noel Hunt and former Royals physio John Fern among the guests coming up. So join us for our next episode anytime after 8 p.m. on Monday. And all that leaves me to say is thank you ever so much to Paul for being our special guest tonight. Thank you, Dylan. Thank you, Johnny. And as ever, come on, you Rs.